The new emperor has somnambulism. Every moonlit night, he would come to my bedchamber and entwine with me. After 3 months, I unexpectedly became pregnant. Just as I was filled with dread, someone at the imperial court mentioned the former emperor's consorts. The new emperor's expression was indifferent. The late emperor was benevolent. There is no need for burial companions. Let the consorts return to their families. I breathed a sigh of relief. For the consorts of the late emperor, this was already the best possible outcome. So on the day of their release, I blended in among the other consorts and boarded a palanquin leaving the palace. But I never expected the palanquin to circle around and come back. I lifted the curtain and saw the handsome new emperor in his dragon robes, his brows and eyes gloomy. Is this Zhen young and vigorous, inferior to the late emperor?
Welcome to a journey of love and destiny under the moonlight. I'm the voice behind Moonlight love stories. Now let us step into the story.
It was my 2nd year in the palace, and before I could receive any favor, the old emperor passed away. According to custom, the late emperor's consorts would either leave the palace to practice asceticism or grow old and die within the palace walls. I had anticipated this day since I first entered the palace, so I wasn't surprised. But I didn't expect the unexpected to come so quickly. Midnight Wutong Palace. The gauze curtains swayed. I was lying on the couch, feigning sleep. Hearing movement, I sat up alertly. As I had not been favored since entering the palace, the maids assigned to me had become quite lax after the late emperor's death, each returning to their rooms to sleep. Now the hall was utterly silent. A tall figure pushed the door open and entered, footsteps approaching. I secretly tightened my grip on the sharp hairpin in my hand. The footsteps stopped before the bed. I blinked and, by the light of a single candle beam, widened my eyes when I saw the man's face. At a distance of 1 person, the man wore bright yellow brocade robes, his black hair cascading like spilled ink, his eyes half-lidded, his features strikingly beautiful. It was Xiao Tsongyan, the late emperor's 9th son, now the new emperor. 2 years ago we were nearly engaged. But back then, he was not favored by the late emperor. Then, the Empress Dowager held a selection to choose consorts to bring luck to the ailing emperor. I was forced to enter the palace, suddenly becoming his stepmother. In the eyes of outsiders, it was because I coveted glory and wealth. After that, whenever we met, his gaze towards me was utterly cold. Why was he here now? Surely not for revenge. I hurriedly rose and paid respects, cautiously addressing him. Your Majesty? Hearing my voice, the man just stared fixedly at me. His eyes dark as ink, lips pressed together, silent. His stare made my heart race uncontrollably. Could there be something on my face? Just as I was about to stealthily feel my face, I heard a soft pat sound. I looked closely and saw the belt fastened around the man's waist had fallen to the ground. Then followed his outer robe, inner garments, revealing a well-built torso. What was he doing? In just a few moments he was completely naked. I was startled, my cheeks instantly burning hot, and turned my back. Your Majesty, this consort is, after all, your stepmother. Before I could finish, I was embraced. A scorching kiss landed on my lips. I was both shocked, resentful, ashamed, and angry. I reached out to push him away, but couldn't move him, instead finding my wrists pinned. His knee pressed against the edge of the bed. Losing my balance, I fell onto the bed with him. I was about to call for help, but when I looked up and met his dark, sunken eyes, I immediately didn't dare. His condition seemed a bit off. Clothes fell to the floor, intertwining with the moonlight. The man's burning body pressed against mine, stirring intense desire. My cheeks flushed crimson, my heart pounded like a drum, and I stared dumbly at the figure above me. The man's eyes were deep and turbulent, sweat beading like jade, desire steaming into a rosy hue, making his sharply defined face even more devastatingly handsome. At that first stunning glimpse years ago, I thought he was extremely good-looking. I was willing to marry him. Now, after 2 years, his looks had become even more outstanding. Ultimately unable to resist such peerless beauty, I closed my eyes. The bed in Wutong Palace creaked and groaned for half the night. I was so tired I couldn't even move a finger. Xiao Tsongyan, however, slowly dressed himself and walked out. Where was he going? I lay on the bed for a while. Seeing him about to leave the bedchamber, I couldn't hold back. Struggling to prop myself up, I followed him out. I followed him all the way to the Imperial Garden, where his steps finally halted. Dawn was breaking, the distant sky tinged with the white of a fish's belly. The man's eyes cleared. I was about to step forward when I saw him frown. How did Zhen get here? Just that one sentence made my steps freeze. A flash of insight shot through my mind, startling me into a shudder. Did Xiao Tsongyan have somnambulism? If he found out that he had come to his father's consort's bedchamber in the middle of the night to engage in intimate acts, and with someone he despised, I feared my life was over. As this thought settled, Xiao Tsongyan seemed to sense something, his sharp gaze shooting towards my direction. I instinctively hid behind a cluster of flowers, my chest heaving with tension, my legs growing weaker. Only when the sound of footsteps faded into the distance did I dare to look back. The figure was gone from the Imperial Garden, leaving only the autumn wind swirling up fallen leaves, drifting slowly down. My half-suspended heart slowly calmed, yet an inexplicable sense of loss welled up. I dragged my exhausted body back to my bedchamber. Judging by Xiao Tsongyan's expression earlier, it seemed he remembered nothing of last night's events. Thinking this, I relaxed. Though extremely weary, I couldn't sleep, my thoughts dragged back to years ago. As the daughter of the Li family, I followed my mother into the palace for a banquet. The banquet was dull. Unable to sit still, I excused myself to freshen up and wandered around the palace. Unknowingly, I ended up in a secluded spot and saw a young man standing there with his back to me. Hearing the noise, he turned around. His black hair ribbon fluttered. The young man's brows and eyes were clear and handsome. I stared blankly, the surroundings seeming to freeze, only my heartbeat racing wildly. In that one glance, I developed a certain fondness for him. After that, I entered the palace several times and interacted with him, only then learning he was the unfavored ninth prince, Xiao Tsongyan. I didn't mind at all and brought him a whole sleeve full of pastries. Here, these are the best date paste cakes from Shangyun Pavilion outside. Taste them, are they better than the palace ones? Perhaps surprised that a daughter of a prominent family would carry pastries on her person. His expression froze for a moment. After a long while, he took the pastry from my hand and tasted a bite. It's good, I said excitedly. And this one, pea flour cake. Xiao Tsongyan ate several pieces in a row, then suddenly choked, coughing violently. Cough, cough, cough. I was startled and quickly patted his back. The distance between us suddenly closed. He instinctively looked up, his lips brushing past the tip of my nose. We both froze. My cheeks warmed and I took a step back, stammering. Are you all right now? The young man also immediately turned his head away, the tips of his ears reddening, and softly grunted in affirmation. The tree shadows swayed, and two hearts rippled with budding emotion. But the good times didn't last. That year, a pox epidemic prevailed in the city. I unfortunately contracted it and was critically ill. Xiao Tsongyan secretly brought the imperial physician to treat me. Then, upon learning a certain medicinal ingredient was missing, he rushed overnight to Ling City to fetch it. Fearing delay would worsen my condition, he traveled day and night without rest. Upon his return, he fell from his horse and broke his leg. After I woke up and learned the whole story, I was deeply moved. At that moment I thought, I want to marry him in this lifetime. But things in life often don't go as one wishes. On the day I learned I had to enter the palace, Xiao Tsongyan stood in the main hall of the Li residence, his brows furrowed with anxiety, looking at me and asking, "Are you really going to enter the palace?" I nodded, expressionless. Yes, the selection period has arrived. Since I am not yet married, I must enter the palace. My father is loyal and devoted. Hearing that the Empress Dowager was reopening the consort selection to bring luck to His Majesty, though reluctant, he submitted my name. My father said to me tearfully, "The Li family's current standing relies entirely on His Majesty's trust. Now that His Majesty is gravely ill, and others are unwilling to enter the palace, how can the daughter of the Li family be ungrateful?" My father was stubborn in his views. I was stubborn in my refusal. I received a slap, knelt in the ancestral hall, but still could not reverse my father's decision. My mother cried as if her heart would break. My father, furious, lamented, pointing at me and my mother. "If that's the case, then I shall follow His Majesty in death." My father had doted on me for years. Now, using death to pressure me, I was helpless. I could only say to Xiao Zongyan heartlessly, "Once I enter the palace, I will hold a high consort rank. Who knows, maybe I can even become Empress Dowager someday. What woman in the world wouldn't want such glory and wealth?" I thought saying this would make him give up, but instead, the young man's eyes gradually reddened. He didn't storm off. He just looked at me and said in a low voice, "I can give you those things too if you just wait a little longer. You need to recognize your status. You are merely an unfavored prince. At best, you'll be enfeoffed as a king and leave the capital. How can you give me that?" As soon as these words were spoken, the young man's face stiffened. "Do you really think that?" I nodded, saying coldly, "Ninth Prince, please leave." After he left, I turned around, tears falling silently. Memories surged in my mind, and I sighed softly. In the end, I was the one who failed him. Now that the new emperor had ascended the throne, the court situation was unstable. There were many government affairs requiring Xiao Zongyan's attention. I initially thought that last night was a mistake, that Xiao Zongyan had mistaken my place for his rear courtyard and wouldn't come again. But I never expected that in the middle of the night, I heard the sound of the door opening again. I opened my eyes. The man's tall figure appeared once more at the entrance to my bedchamber. Moonlight streamed down, casting a long shadow. I was stunned. Exclamation point. No, how did he get here? Where was his chief eunuch? Xiao Zongyan walked in on his own. Seeing him getting closer and closer, I hardened my heart, rolled off the bed, turned and ran. But before I could run more than a few steps, he caught me, hooking an arm around my waist and pinning me against the dressing table. The ties of my garment were loosened. A hand slipped under my skirt, roaming and stirring tingling heat wherever it touched. "Zhou Lang." I was frantic, and without thinking, called out his old name. Only after the words escaped did I realize that in his current state, he probably wouldn't respond. Unexpectedly, the man's movements paused for a moment, and he grunted in acknowledgement. I was momentarily shocked. Had he woken up? I trembled as I looked up. In the bronze mirror, the man behind me had deep-set eyes, the expression in them unclear. Was he awake or not? I tentatively spoke. "Your Majesty, this consort is Li Xiaoning." This name seemed to strike a chord with the man. He abruptly lifted his gaze. "No way." He still held a grudge. If I'd known, I wouldn't have brought it up. Though afraid, since the words were already out, there was no taking them back. I steeled myself, deciding to be reckless. "You are the emperor now. Whether you kill me or slice me, it's up to you. Having me accompany the late emperor in burial is fine too. Consider it. Consider it repaying his life-saving grace from back then." Having said that, I closed my eyes. But the expected sarcastic, cold remarks never came. Instead, my lips were kissed again. I instantly opened my eyes and saw the person before me no longer speaking, just lowering his head to bite the nape of my neck. The next moment, I let out an uncontrollable, stifled moan. Amidst the movements, the figures in the bronze mirror swayed, adrift in a sea of desire. After another bout of intimacy, my hair was disheveled. I watched him dress himself neatly and leave again. This time I didn't chase after him. I slowly made my way back to the bed, lifted my hand, and placed it over my forehead. This is a dream, right? If only it really were a dream. For half a month straight, Xiao Zongyan frequently sleepwalked to Wutong Palace. From my initial nervousness and unease, to later discovering he remembered nothing after daybreak, I felt a pang of bitterness, but also a sliver of joy. Didn't this, in a way, mean I had married him? Thinking this, I felt inexplicably happy. But before I could rejoice for long, I overheard the usually lazy palace maids gossiping. I heard His Majesty summoned the imperial physician. I wonder if he's fallen ill. Really? His Majesty seems healthy. Who knows? Perhaps His Majesty has some hidden ailment. The voices grew softer, but I heard them clearly. My heart felt hollow and I stood frozen in place. Then suddenly I understood. Course. Him leaving his bedchamber every night would inevitably be noticed by someone. Xiao Zongyan wasn't the type to avoid doctors. He would certainly seek treatment for his somnambulism. Thinking this, my good mood instantly dissipated. Not wanting to hear more gossip from the maids, I went alone to the imperial garden. But just as I was absent-mindedly admiring the flowers, a group of people approached. I looked up and, caught off guard, abruptly met a pair of pitch-black eyes. It was actually Xiao Zongyan. I was momentarily stunned. It was too late to avoid him. The chief eunuch beside him glanced at me, his eyes shifting slightly, and softly reminded, "Your Majesty, this is the late Emperor's consort Zhao." Zhen knows. The man's tone was indifferent, devoid of any emotion. My heart ached, but I didn't show it, performing a slight curtsy. "I pay my respects to your Majesty." I waited a long time for a response. Just as I was beginning to feel strained, Xiao Zongyan finally deigned to speak. "Rise. Consort Zhao is, after all, Zhan's stepmother. There's no need for such formality." He emphasized the word stepmother heavily. It felt like a saw was slowly torturing my heart, letting it become a bloody mess. Still, I maintained a smiling face. "Thank you, Your Majesty. This consort is somewhat tired and will return to her palace now." Xiao Zongyan said nothing more. I turned around but felt a gaze fixed intently on my back, sharp as knives and halberds, making my skin prickle. My steps involuntarily quickened, almost like a frantic escape. Thus, I failed to notice the man's eyes darken instantly. In the days that followed, I didn't see Xiao Zongyan again. I heard from the Imperial Hospital that His Majesty had been unwell lately, and was taking medicine to recuperate. Presumably, the episodes would not recur in the future. I sat in the courtyard. The palace walls in late autumn were particularly desolate, but not as barren as the feeling in my heart. In the blink of an eye, over 2 more months passed, reaching the depths of winter, branches laden with white snow. One morning I felt nauseous and retched for a while, but didn't vomit anything. Remembering that my monthly courses hadn't come for nearly 2 months, my face turned pale. Could it be that I was pregnant? I sat by the bed, anxious and uneasy, but didn't dare summon the imperial physician. The late emperor had been gone for 4 months. If I were discovered to be 3 months pregnant, I would surely be accused of illicit relations and beaten to death. But Xiao Zongyan didn't remember any of this. My fingertips unconsciously clenched my skirt, wishing I could grow wings and fly out of the palace, escaping this desperate situation where heaven wouldn't answer my cries. Just as I was burning with anxiety, the maid, Pinger, ran in joyfully. "Your ladyship, an imperial decree from His Majesty. You are to return home." I didn't catch it clearly at first and hurriedly stood up. Seeing this, Pinger repeated, "Word just came from the court. They say His Majesty declared before all the ministers that the late emperor was benevolent. His consorts need not accompany him in burial, nor remain in the palace or leave for a nunnery. They are to return to their families. Return to their families, return to their families." These 4 words rolled around my lips and teeth. After a long while, I lowered my lashes and slowly let out a sigh of relief. For the consorts of the late emperor, this was already the best possible outcome. I had nothing to be discontent with. When do we leave? I heard myself ask. Pinger replied. They say we can leave tomorrow. Sedan chairs have been prepared outside the palace gate to escort the consorts out. So soon. My eyes widened slightly, but then I reconsidered. It was probably because Xiao Tsongyan didn't want to see me in the palace anymore. So be it. I stopped overthinking and packed my things alone. Although I had been in the palace for a while, my belongings were few. I hadn't brought my personal maid when I entered the palace, afraid that if the late emperor passed away and consorts were required to accompany him in burial, I would implicate the maid who had grown up with me. Thinking of their tearful faces when I entered the palace, my mood improved considerably. Now returning home we could be together again. The sun rose and the moon set, and soon it was the following evening. Carrying my luggage, I blended in with the other consorts leaving the palace, queuing to go out. Consorts who had previously been at odds with each other were now exceptionally amiable. I never thought we'd have a day when we could leave the palace. Yes, His Majesty is truly a good ruler. Everyone chattered away, some sorrowful, some joyful. I remained silent. When it was my turn, for no reason I glanced back. Verdant tiles, vermilion walls, layers of palaces. No familiar figure in sight. Once we parted this time, we would likely never meet again in this lifetime. I withdrew my gaze and boarded the sedan chair, accompanied by a call of "Lift the sedan." I sat inside, calculating that it would take a little over half an hour to reach home. Lost in thought, I didn't know how much time had passed. Suddenly the sedan chair stopped. Had we arrived? That couldn't be right. When leaving the palace and passing through the bustling market streets, there should have been noise. Throughout the journey, I hadn't heard any commotion. Thinking this, my heart panicked, and I hurriedly lifted the curtain to look. It was still the vermilion palace walls. The only difference was that it was no longer the remote Xihua Gate, but the Donghua Gate. Ah, did we take a wrong turn? I quickly called out to the palace servants carrying the sedan. I was supposed to leave the palace, not circle around. The servant respectfully replied, "It's not wrong. This is the place." Before I could react, a tall figure appeared in my field of vision. Xiao Tsongyan in dragon robes strode over. His expression was stern and cold. His deep eyes lifted, fixing on my clearly astonished face, and his expression suddenly darkened. He barked an order. "All of you withdraw." Yes. The attending servants scattered in an instant. In less than the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, only the two of us remained before the vast palace gate. I felt inexplicably awkward, restless, and wanted to retreat back into the sedan chair. But obviously, the man before me wouldn't give me that chance. Just as I was weighing my words, a shadow fell over me. I looked up in surprise, just in time to meet the man's eyes, dark as if steeped in night. He practically squeezed the words out through gritted teeth. "Is Zhan, young and strong, inferior to the late emperor? Are you so eager to leave?" I was instantly speechless, thinking, "You're the one who sent me away." I opened my mouth about to speak, but right then, a wave of nausea hit me. I couldn't hold back and retched. "Ugh." Xiao Tsongyan's expression changed instantly. "Did he touch you?" Seeing me bend over, retching continuously, Xiao Tsongyan stood still for a moment, the light in his eyes shifting several times. Hearing this, I quickly waved my hand. "It's, ugh." I wanted to make an excuse, say I ate something bad, but my stomach was churning uncomfortably, wave after wave, and I couldn't form a complete sentence. Once I finally felt a bit better, I looked up to see Xiao Tsongyan's expression terrifyingly fierce, as if he wanted to devour someone. I instinctively took a small step back. But this small step back seemed to wound the man greatly. Xiao Tsongyan's face abruptly turned even more unpleasant. I suddenly recalled the earlier conversation. "No, it must be something I ate." My expression changed slightly, and I instinctively said, "I don't know why I'm explaining, but the words just came out." Half-truth. Most effective for deception. But Xiao Tsongyan's expression didn't improve. his gaze fixed intently on me. "Zhen will have the imperial physician examine you." Summon the imperial physician. That absolutely wouldn't do. I panicked, hurriedly waving my hands. There's no need for the trouble. It's late, and my father at home must have received the news early and be waiting for my return. With that, I turned, wanting to duck back into the sedan chair. But my wrist was grabbed. "Are you truly set on leaving?" The question reached my ears. My steps halted abruptly. In that instant, the shadow of the sundial seemed to stop moving. Shadows reversed from slow to fast. Flowers on the trees went from withered to blooming. Leaves on the branches turned from yellow to green, then back to budding. The sun rose from the west back to the mid-sky, then set towards the east. Fish leaped from the mid-air into the lake, their tails flicking, disappearing without a trace. The deep voice beside me overlapped with the trembling question from outside the Li residence 2 years ago. "Are you truly going to enter the palace? Are you truly set on leaving?" My fingertips unconsciously dug into my palms. My heart beat as if trying to leap out of my chest. A powerful impulse surged from the depths of my heart, wanting to blurt out the truth about his sleepwalking and our encounters. The words reached my lips, but I abruptly looked up and met the man's already restored, indifferent expression. The words on my tongue were ultimately swallowed back. I was now a consort of the late emperor. If I remained in the palace, it would harm his reputation. The grip on my wrists suddenly loosened. "Then you can walk back yourself," I heard the man say coldly. Having said that, he flicked his sleeves and left. I watched his retreating back, pressed my lips together, and left. Walking would be good exercise. But I had only gone a short distance when I saw a sedan chair hurriedly chasing after me. Miss Li, wait for us servants." I turned around in surprise and saw it was the same palanquin bearers from before. After a momentary daze, I understood. Xiao Tsongyin was truly a very good person. It's just a pity it was all like the moon reflected in water, a flower in a mirror, an illusion. I returned to the Li residence. My mother was overjoyed. My father, feeling guilty towards me, indulged me in everything. My 2 personal maids, upon seeing my return, also hugged me and wept, exclaiming repeatedly, "It's wonderful, the young mistress has returned." But I couldn't feel happy. As time passed, my abdomen became prominent, clearly becoming impossible to hide. If my father found out, he would certainly assume it was the late emperor's posthumous child and send me back to the palace. Dongchun and Liuji were my confidants. Learning the truth, though shocked, suggested, "Then, young mistress, perhaps you shouldn't keep this child?" Let me think about it. My thoughts were in chaos. After sending them away, I sat alone by the window in a daze. I don't know how much time passed before commotion suddenly arose in the front courtyard. Dongchun pushed the door open. "Young mistress, His Majesty is here." Since our unpleasant parting at the palace gate a month ago, I hadn't seen him. I heard that court officials had proposed he establish an empress and take consorts, and he had agreed. Why was he here instead of in the palace? I didn't understand, nor did I plan to go to the front hall. It was probably just to pay respects to her father, a minister who had served 2 courts. But then Dongchun added, "Young mistress, the master requests your presence in the front hall." "Summon me." I pondered for a moment, changed into a loose ruchuan that didn't reveal my figure, and then walked towards the front courtyard. Because of the imperial presence, the front courtyard was brightly lit. When I reached outside the main hall, I heard voices conversing inside. "I wonder what important matter brings your majesty to your servant's humble residence at this hour." My father's voice held some tension. This was normal. Father, as the Minister of Rights, had been valued by the late emperor. But as the saying goes, a new emperor brings new ministers. If he couldn't gain the new emperor's trust, his official hat and even his life would be in jeopardy. It was hard not to be apprehensive. "Minister Li, there is no need for excessive courtesy. Today at court, Several ministers proposed that Jeanne establish an empress and take consorts. Jeanne has only recently ascended the throne and is busy with government affairs. Furthermore, the Empress Dowager has already entered the imperial mausoleum. It is widely known that Minister Li was highly regarded by the late emperor. Jeanne will trouble Minister Li to put more thought into the matter of selecting the empress. The position of empress was extremely important, both for the court and the inner palace. Typically, the selection was made from the emperor's maternal family. Now, entrusting such an important matter to a minister, and discussing it privately no less, seemed designed to make enemies for the Li family. Watching my father sweat profusely, I was momentarily speechless. Was Xiao Zongyan taking revenge on the Li family? Although I had long anticipated this, when it actually happened, my heart felt so stifled I could barely breathe. But this concerned the entire Li clan, so I had to speak up. Your servant pays respects to your majesty. My abrupt voice broke the stagnant atmosphere in the hall. Seeing me arrive, my father's expression was complex, as if he wanted to speak but stopped himself. He wasn't unaware of the affection between Xiao Zongyan and me back then, yet he had stubbornly persisted, leading to today's situation. Rise! From the seat of honor, the young emperor's voice was calm and distant. Suppressing the bitterness in my heart, I looked at my father. Might this servant have a few words in private with His Majesty? My father hesitated, but seeing that Xiao Zongyan did not refuse, he led the others away. Soon, only the two of us remained in the hall. How familiar this scene felt. I looked quietly at the person before me, met his indifferent gaze, sorted my thoughts and spoke softly. Your Majesty, my father is already advanced in years and cannot bear such a heavy responsibility. Jeanne sees Minister Li as a pillar of the state, utterly loyal to the court. How could he be unworthy? Xiao Zongyan's expression was faint, as if determined to make things difficult. Hearing this, my scalp went numb. Out of options, I could only plead in a low voice. What happened in the past was my fault. Could you, for the sake of our past affection, spare the Li family? You now sit on the supreme throne and can welcome 3,000 consorts. As soon as these words were spoken, the man's lips curled into a mocking arc, but he didn't speak. My heart pounded, unsure of his meaning. After a long while, I finally heard him speak coldly. Jeanne has important matters to discuss with Minister Li. Miss Li, you may withdraw. This was his way of saying he didn't wish to speak with me further. My lips moved, afraid that saying more would lead to more mistakes, so I didn't linger. After I stepped out of the room, Xiao Zongyan loosened his grip, his hand pale from clenching. The teacup he had been holding had long since shattered, his heart seeming to bleed. He let out a scornful laugh, but his eyes were dim and devoid of light. Not long after I returned to my room, the sky suddenly rumbled with thunder. Spring rain began to fall, startling the dormant insects. In the evening, after finishing my meal, I admired the rain for a while before closing the window and retiring to rest. The rain pattered against the window frame, drip-drop. Just as I was growing drowsy, a sound came from outside the door. I instantly woke, quickly lifting the curtain to look. No one. I withdrew my gaze, laughing at myself for hallucinating. Xiao Zongyan should have returned to the palace long ago. How could he possibly sleepwalk to my place? Then again, his sleepwalking should have been cured by now. Thinking this, I let out a bitter laugh. Just as I was about to go back to sleep, the window creaked open. The wind, probably. I was too lazy to get up and check, just closed my eyes. Only when I heard footsteps did I open my eyes. I saw Xiao Zongyan, drenched from head to toe, walking towards me. His gaze was fixed on me, his eyes dark and deep, as if half asleep, exactly like the previous times. I was momentarily at a loss for words. Whose sleepwalking involves climbing through windows? Your Majesty, you are simply too formidable. But if any servants or maids had seen him along the way, that would be disastrous. I quickly sat up. Your Majesty, you. Before I could finish, I was pulled into a tight embrace. My heart sank. Now that I was pregnant, I couldn't let him act recklessly. I became anxious and pushed against him. But the man's strength was terrifying. I struggled for a while, ultimately failing. Just as I thought he was about to proceed, his head suddenly dropped against my shoulder. The man lowered his head, his forehead resting on my shoulder, and murmured, "You're abandoning me again." Froze. My heart felt sore and swollen, as if soaked in vinegar. I held his drenched body, about to say something, when his hands started wandering again. I was both embarrassed and angry. But afraid he might catch a chill, I steeled myself and proactively helped him take off his wet clothes, hanging them to the side. Then I took a cloth and dried his hair. By the time I finished, I was panting from exhaustion. When I turned back, I saw the man who had been so majestic and stern just moments before, looking at me obediently, my figure reflected in the depths of his dark eyes. A wave of sweetness seemed to inject into my heart, diluting the sourness considerably. But once day broke, he would return to that cold state. It was like a mirage, sea foam, shattered at a touch. "Behave and sleep, or I'll call for someone," I warned. He continued to stare straight at me. My gaze drifted downward, landing on a certain part of him, and my cheeks instantly burned. No way. Even drenched like this, how could he still? But given his unstable condition, my face flushed. I mustered my courage and tied his hands to the headboard, ensuring he couldn't move. Fortunately, this time Xiao Tsongyan didn't immediately get straight to business like before. Instead, he let me tie him up obediently, those dark eyes seeming misty as they watched me, as if curious about what I would do. After finishing the tying, I let go and stepped back slightly, looking down at the man I had trussed up like a crab. My heart pounded wildly. This was truly fatal. I had actually tied up the reigning emperor. But desperate times call for desperate measures. Yes, that's it. I let out a breath, finally let down the bed curtains, mischievously pinched him, and was satisfied to hear a muffled grunt. Served him right for deliberately seeking revenge. Now he's fallen into my hands, hasn't he? I hummed lightly and lay down beside him. This night had been full of twists and turns, and I was already exhausted. Before long, I fell into a deep sleep, completely ignoring the man beside me burning with desire, almost enough to start a prairie fire. I slept very soundly. Unbeknownst to me, the person beside me slowly opened his eyes at daybreak. Slivers of light slipped through the cracks in the window, illuminating the quiet room. When Xiao Tsongyan opened his eyes, he instinctively tried to shield them with his hand but found he couldn't move. Who dared to tie him up? Xiao Tsongyan looked down and saw a red cord binding his naked body tightly. Instantly, towering rage surged within him. His bound hands quickly untied the knots, and he threw the red cord aside. He sat up, about to kick the person lying next to him off the bed, but when he turned his head and looked, he abruptly froze. Xiaoning. The woman lay quietly beside him, her face serene and beautiful, her abdomen slightly rounded. His mind was thrown into chaos. He sat there dumbfounded, unable to react. He hadn't known about his sleepwalking before, but often upon waking, he found himself not in his bedchamber but in the imperial garden. His attendant, Xiao Fuzi, who had served him for years, had hesitated to speak several times. Sensing something amiss, he summoned a trusted imperial physician and concisely explained the situation. According to the physician's diagnosis, he had somnambulism, likely caused by excessive stress. So he had the physician prepare medicine for him. He took it daily, and such episodes had ceased. Today, visiting the Li residence, he hadn't planned to stay long, but encountering the sudden heavy rain, he had ended up staying the night. He thought the sleepwalking had stopped, but who could have imagined? Xiao Tsongyan's gaze fell on Li Xiaoning's abdomen, his eyes darkening. The child was his. He was certain. The late emperor had been bedridden for a long time, and after his death, Li Xiaoning had been confined to the palace. The only one who could have touched her was him. But she had never mentioned it. Was she afraid he would harm the child? Thinking of her avoidance and the way she had spoken in the main hall, Xiao Tsongyan's heart felt as if it were being pricked by needles. He reached out, wanting to touch her, but afraid of waking her. He withdrew his hand. After a long while he got up, put on his clothes and left. The rain had stopped, and the sky was clear. Xiao Tsongyan stood in the courtyard looking at the sky and suddenly said, "Xiao Fuzi." The chief eunuch, who had been waiting outside the courtyard, hurried over. "Your Majesty. Go to the Imperial Medical Bureau and summon physician Gu to Zhan's study." "Yes." Xiao Fuzi didn't dare delay and immediately went to the Imperial Medical Bureau. After a while physician Gu arrived. Xiao Tsongyan sat behind the desk, his expression unreadable. Physician Gu knelt on the ground, trembling with fear. "Zhan asks you, what is the cause of Zhan's somnambulism?" Physician Gu was stunned, then cautiously replied, "Your Majesty, somnambulism is often caused by excessive stress. Your Majesty has been working tirelessly day and night, which may have led to this condition." Xiao Tsongyan's eyes darkened. "Is that so?" Physician Gu. "Yes." Xiao Tsongyan waved his hand. "You may go." Physician Gu breathed a sigh of relief and quickly withdrew. After he left, Xiao Tsongyan stood up and walked to the window. The sky was clear after the rain, and the air was fresh. He looked into the distance, his gaze deep and unfathomable. He had always thought his somnambulism was due to stress, but now it seemed that wasn't the case. He had taken the medicine prescribed by Physician Gu for a long time, but the sleepwalking had not stopped. It was only after he stopped taking the medicine that the episodes ceased. This meant that the medicine was ineffective. Or perhaps, his somnambulism was not caused by stress. Then what was the cause? Xiao Tsongyan frowned, lost in thought. He recalled that every time he sleepwalked, he would go to Li Xiaoning's place. Was it because of her? Thinking this, his heart tightened. He turned and walked out of the study. He wanted to ask her clearly, but when he arrived outside her room, he hesitated again. If she denied it, what should he do? If she admitted it, what should he do? He stood outside the door for a long time, but in the end he didn't go in. He turned and left. He needed time to think. I woke up and found Xiao Tsongyan gone. The red cord that had been tied to the bedpost was also gone. My heart tightened. Had he woken up? Had he seen me? Had he seen my pregnant belly? A series of questions made me restless. I got up and called Dongchun and Liujian to help me dress. After washing up, I sat in the room, waiting for news from the palace. But I waited until noon, and there was no movement. My heart grew even more uneasy. Just as I was about to send someone to inquire, a servant from the front courtyard came to report, "Miss, His Majesty has sent someone." My heart skipped a beat. "Let them in." Soon a eunuch came in. It was Xiao Fuzi. He bowed to me. "Miss Li, His Majesty has ordered this servant to deliver a message." I steadied myself. "Speak." Xiao Fuzi. "His Majesty says since Miss Li is pregnant, you should rest well at home. There is no need to worry about other matters." My mind went blank. He knew. He really knew. What did he mean? Let me rest well at home. Was he letting me keep the child? Or? My heart was in turmoil. Xiao Fuzi finished speaking and left. I sat in the room, lost in thought for a long time. In the end, I decided to go to the palace to see him. I wanted to ask him clearly. I changed clothes and went to the palace. When I arrived at the palace gate, the guards stopped me. I said, "I am Li Xiaoning, here to see His Majesty." The guards naturally recognized me and quickly let me through. I went straight to the Qingjing Hall. Xiao Tsongyan was reviewing memorials. Hearing the report, he raised his head and saw me. A flicker of surprise passed through his eyes, but it quickly returned to calm. He waved his hand, dismissing the attendants. The hall fell silent. I walked up to him and knelt down. "Your servant pays respects to Your Majesty." He looked at me, his tone indifferent. "Rise." I stood up and looked at him. Your Majesty, about the child. He interrupted me. The child is Jeanne's, isn't it? I was stunned, then nodded. Yes. He was silent for a moment, then said, Since it is Jeanne's child, Jeanne will naturally take responsibility. My heart tightened. What does Your Majesty mean? He looked at me. You will stay in the palace. After the child is born, Jeanne will grant you a title. My heart sank. He still wanted to keep me in the palace. As a consort of the late emperor, if I stayed in the palace, what would I be? What would the child be? I took a deep breath. Your Majesty, this servant is a consort of the late emperor. Staying in the palace is against etiquette. His expression darkened. Are you refusing Jeanne's offer? I knelt down again. This servant does not dare. I only ask Your Majesty to consider the child's future. He was silent for a long time. Just as I thought he would get angry, he suddenly sighed. Jeanne knows your concerns. He helped me up. Jeanne has a solution. I looked at him in confusion. He said, Jeanne will issue an edict, posthumously adopting you as the late emperor's daughter, granting you the title of princess. Then Jeanne will marry you as the empress. I was stunned. This was too absurd. But seeing his serious expression, I knew he wasn't joking. My heart was in turmoil. This was indeed a solution. Your Majesty, this. He looked at me. What? You're unwilling. I shook my head. No, it's just too sudden. He held my hand. Xiaoning, Jeanne knows he was wrong in the past. Give Jeanne a chance to make amends. I looked at him, my eyes slightly sore. After a long while I nodded. All right. He smiled, his smile bright and dazzling. He pulled me into his arms. Xiaoning, thank you. I leaned against his chest, feeling the long-lost warmth, and my heart finally settled. Perhaps this was fate. We were destined to be together. No matter the twists and turns, we would ultimately be together.
Thank you for listening Beneath the Moonlight. If this story touched your heart, remember to subscribe to Moonlit Love Stories for more tales of love and destiny. Until we meet again, may the moonlight keep you company.